Hi, this is Alex Glasgow. Today I'm going to be talking to my colleague David Ormsby about the application of soil testing in turf. So firstly, Dave, when we're doing soil testing, what is the actual soil test aiming to do?
So there's a lot of mystique around soil testing. The reality is a soil test is a snapshot at a moment in time that measures the plant available nutrient. In other words, it tries to avoid measuring those things that the plant can't immediately use. So for example, nutrients that might be held in organic matter, locked up by anion or phosphate retention as some will know it, or just the effect of different soil types.
Yeah, and I think in turf, a good example of locked up nutrient is if you've got a lot of organic matter, particularly thatch, that represents a large amount of nutrient in the thatch, but it's not plant available because it's in a form that's not broken down and available to the plant. Okay, secondly, how are the actual soil tests for each nutrient arrived at?
So the first thing to understand here is that globally there are a large number of soil testing methods available. As a rule, soil testing is very situational. What we mean by this is it's based on the local soil type, the local climate, and the crops or plants that are being grown in a particular area.
So in New Zealand, how could you talk a little bit about the development of the soil testing processes that we use in New Zealand? Because it's a very widely used method of analysis in New Zealand in agriculture.
Right, so in New Zealand, we're a very strong agricultural nation, and right from the beginning, our agriculture has been supported by a substantial research program. The basis of some of this research was to provide some supporting information for soil testing. In other words, a soil test is a meaningless set of numbers if it's not supported by research that is pertinent to your crop, your soil type, and then allows you to make an interpretation and from that undertake some recommendations. So in New Zealand, we, as part of our agricultural background, have had a number of organisations such as DSIR, Crop Research and the likes undertake lots of trials to determine what soil testing methods provide the best way or the most accurate way of measuring plant available nutrient in New Zealand situations.
So what we shouldn't take for granted just how fortunate we are in terms of the information that we have about the types of soil tests to use and the applicability of them here and interpretation of results from New Zealand soils. So what would you say about just deciding to send soil test samples overseas to be done maybe in the United States? What are your thoughts on that?
The actual testing procedure you're going to use will be a very accurate procedure. The problem is, in most cases, for example, if we look at mealage, which is a common test used overseas, it is generally based on older soil types and usually more alkaline environments. So the difficulty we have here is how relevant are those results to a New Zealand situation. Similarly, a major issue that turf managers usually overlook is when you chop and change between soil tests or soil testing methods, you actually lose the major advantage of a soil test. That is the database that you've built up over time. In other words, you can't directly compare the soil test results from a mealage test with the test that we might see from a New Zealand laboratory.
Okay, so the main message there is be aware of the importance of selecting and sticking with essentially the most appropriate soil testing procedure or method for you. Next thing I wanted to talk to you about is how do farmers use soil tests?
So in the rural sector, soil testing is used for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's basically driven by economics. The farmer has to spend money to create grass, to create profit. What they want to ascertain from the soil test in the first instance is what amounts of nutrient do I need to apply to optimize my profit? The second thing is farmers are subjected to much tougher environmental rules than we are in turf. So they need to undertake a soil test so that they make sure that the nutrients they're applying do not exceed specific regional council or rules. Thirdly, in farming, we don't have the resources that we would see on a golf course. So given their large cation exchange capacity, in other words, a large petrol tank to store nutrients, a farming approach will involve front-loading the system. In other words, applying the macronutrients that they anticipate needing for the next 12 months, and then perhaps on more intensive farming, topping up with additional nitrogen during the season.
Okay, so how about turf? What's the basic approach to the use of soil testing in turf?
So the first thing we find in turf is that we don't have that same economic driver. So that means what we need to think about is turf quality. I guess the big benefit for us in turf is it provides a benchmark of in terms of how effective is your current fertilizer program. There are numerous things that are also important in turf, like the age of the turf area, the root zone it's constructed from, but this is quite a big subject, so we'll cover this in a future podcast.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave, because one of the big differences in turf is that, especially highly maintained turf, is you're usually on sandy soils with very low CECs that can't store much nutrient, and that definitely has an impact on how you use soil test results. And as Dave said, we will talk about that further in a future podcast. Thank you.